This morning, the reading is Tangled. It's a poem by Dawn Starr Sarah's Borcheldt. Knit 6, purl 6, sets of 2 rows, 4 rows, 6 rows up to 12, patterns, repeating, steady, soothingly same. This is not what life is like. Life is like picking up a tousled hunk of yarn pulled out of the basket by an impatient child looking for a string too many times. You find an end, you follow the thread for a while, and sooner or later you hit a tangle, knots and twists and loops all mixed up together. Sometimes I sit there and untangle it, pulling little by little until I have one piece stretched out and can go on to the next one. Sometimes I grab a pair of scissors and cut. Enough, I only need a little. Anyway, but sometimes I hold the tangle in my hand, amazed for a moment at the complexity, the mess. I look at it and think, this can't be solved. It just is. There are patterns, connections, confusing ones, frustrating ones, the thread turning back on itself as life also does. The tangled things will always be here. In this moment, I am living through, right now, whatever comes after. Even if I work through this, even if I cut the cord and walk away, look at the tangled knot in the yarn. Look at how it hurts.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gabriela, and I'm a friend of Liz's and of this church. I was thinking in terms of opening words. I'm a counselor, one may say, and I usually start with what people think about a topic. So I don't open, people open with what they know already. So I was thinking to open the discussion about, in the honor of the LGBT plus History Month, to start a discussion about gender, very briefly, promise. I will share my screen, and if I can, because I have a few pictures. I think better in pictures and tables. So if Marcy, you could allow me, thank you so much. This is a brief story of how when we were preparing to welcome our first child into the world, we felt pressured to have a gender reveal gathering. We were not these good-looking people in a picture, and we ended up by not doing this gender reveal because we didn't want to subject the kid so early to the prejudices that were so present in our old world. So we avoided ideas that came our way that were very, very fancy. Friends wanted to help us. And it's good that we avoided some potential disasters. So I went to see my OB a week before delivery, and a very experienced person. He was blinded to, the chart was blinded, and says, still, oh, she's doing just fine. Oh, how do you know? Because the heart rate is more rapid. Guess what? The child comes to the world, to the joy of our old world families. It's a boy, someone to carry the name of the family. Which family, you may ask, but we'll stay there. So our child decided later on that they have a mind of their own, and we had a boy for a while. This is what my friend Liz keeps saying, so we don't forget. I was thinking to think together as an opening time to what do we consider feminine attributes? What do we consider masculine? What do people think about it? I would invite everyone to throw some words at me and tell me, what do you consider feminine, for instance? What words come to mind?
Beauty. Sweetness.
Oh,
Okay. I consider my husband beautiful.
Delicate mother, housekeeper.
My
Compassionate.
husband is a wonderful cook. Compassion. How about masculine? What can you tell me about that? What comes to mind?
Stoic.
I would say that about my grandmother.
Aggressive,
I can say that about my mother.
ambitious for masculine,
What am I?
smelly.
I'm trying not to. There are cultures that don't believe in deodorants, and hey, no chemicals on my body. So
The best males are bald.
Yes.
breast cancer, and breast cancer can come in guys as well, and it's very aggressive. So really, when I was preparing for testimonies at the legislative session with data about what's feminine, masculine, I came across this idea that the differences across one gender are a lot larger than the differences between genders. And I think that makes sense. One may be sophisticated enough to say, oh, well, we all have parts that are feminine, masculine. Still, this sounded to me like a bidimensional view. And I will leave you for now with this image. What does this mean if we bring color into play?
So, one of the first instances of homophobia that I can recall, though I'm positive it wasn't the first, was when I was in high school in Nashville, Tennessee. The coach of my softball team asked me to ride to an away game with him. Not very common. And on the way, he told me that some of my teammates thought that I was a lesbian. He said that he was only telling this because he loved me, but he didn't want me to make them feel bad. He had no suggestions about how I might do that, and that the problem wasn't really mine, but theirs. Nice. What I didn't realize until years later was that my reaction to him telling me this was also a little homophobic, as I felt offended and embarrassed, even though I knew I was not gay. Granted, the way the coach told me, the fact that he said anything at all, made it clear that this was an accusation. And I already stood out as a newcomer, a stranger, a Yankee, which, being from Colorado, always confused me. So just add lesbian to the list. Yet, lesbian landed on my 16-year-old self much differently than Yankee, even though I was neither, and both were offensive to my peers. Part of my reaction was the coach's delivery, and part was on me and my internal bias. This lovely chat took place in 1985, where HIV/AIDS was all over the news. Rock Hudson had just announced that he had AIDS, and Ryan White was refused admittance to his school because he received AIDS via a blood transfusion because he was a hemophiliac. And hundreds, thousands of mostly gay men were diagnosed, dying, or dead from this poorly understood disease. It was a sad and tragic time that still doesn't get the place in history that it deserves. There was all sorts of vitriol being spewed about the gays, and something that still continues today, unfortunately. Acceptance of those who identify as LGBTQ plus was generally never a problem for me. My parents had no issue, and so I was given a strong, accepting foundation as a kid. I am grateful for their acceptance, something I didn't know how much I would appreciate and need in the years to come. In 2019, when my dad turned 90, we threw a big bash with family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. It was well attended. At that time, my 15-year-old identified as non-binary and had chosen the name Jay, and whose preferred pronouns were they, them. When I asked them how to introduce them, he said, just tell them I'm your non-binary kid who goes by Jay. No big deal. Jay was calm about it, as were his dad and their dad and I. But I know Don and I were worried about the response that Jay might get. To my utter joy and relief, everyone was great, at least on the surface, and that's really what mattered at that time. My dad said, and then texted later, quote, "I love my grandchild, no matter what, no matter who they are." Pretty good for 90. I know most of my family don't understand the journey, but they have not let that affect how they treat my kiddo. Today, my kiddo, my son, has settled into a new legal name, Quinn Aaron, Quinn with a C, and Aaron, A-R-A-N, as in the islands. And he is transgender. He announced his preferred pronouns of he, him, at the dinner table when we were celebrating his 16th birthday with me, Dawn, and my dad present. Happy birthday, Quinn. For me, he, him was a harder leap than they, them. They, them is more fluid, more easily thought of it in a way that I wanted it to be, and less defined than he, him. I struggled to really lean into the new pronouns and identity. This was something far beyond my experience and understanding. Still, I was so grateful that Quinn felt comfortable talking to me and Dawn, and blessed that I was getting to know the real Quinn. It is not hard to lean into that. My family's journey has not traveled in a straight line. There is a grief as I let go of assumptions about his future and what he will be, but those were never mine in the first place. So Quinn has traveled a long, long way on his journey of self-discovery. I work to look at this as a chance to welcome in the authentic Quinn, rather than the loss of some imagined Quinn. That's my work, and Dawn's work, and all of our work, to look inward and learn how ways of thinking, new ways of thinking and of accepting. And though our journey with Quinn has wandered all over the place and taken us to new and strange lands, just as the North Star showed ancient sailors the way, our love for Quinn has been our constant guide, our North Star. We still make pronoun errors, and though the name change was easy, it took a while to get that too. In the heat of a battle or fight, my reptilian brain would go to the original name. Not so much anymore. The mistakes were made and are still being made. But already we see is a person more comfortable in his skin. There's a long way to go, but together with unwavering love for one another, we will make it through to the other side, if there is such a thing. Quinn has taught me so much. Not only have I been brought into a greater understanding of trans folk, and LGBTQ folk in general, but he has taught me what matters in a person, how to be accepting and loving, and that acceptance and love are totally separate from understanding. I would like to understand many things. Humans in general like to have an understanding of things, including people. We want them to fit nicely into categories. What I've learned is understanding is not always possible, and it's hardly ever necessary. Wish my math teacher knew that. Does anyone truly understand another? Hell, I don't even understand myself. Yet we all have criteria that we look for, and we can be made uncomfortable by those who do not neatly fit into categories. At worst, Quinn has made space for me to have new and different categories for people. At best, he has taught me that categories are ridiculous and prevent us from seeing people as they are. He has expanded my capacity for acceptance. Acceptance, which as defined by Merriam-Webster is, quote, able or willing to accept something or someone, inclined to regard something or someone with acceptance rather than fear or hostility, unquote. Without fear or hostility. Bullying, hate crimes, kicking your kid out of your house, all these things are because of fear and hostility. My mantra, though sometimes difficult as a parent, is to lead with love, not fear. What a gift to have learned, to be learning so much from my kiddo. I have worked to do, and I have weak points, places where my acceptance wavers, things I do, I say, or I think that lead with fear rather than with love. It is my practice. Lead with love, not fear. There are many challenges about ahead. Society is not fully accepting or even partly accepting in many places. And LGBTQ plus people do not have the same rights as others in North Dakota or across the country. That can make it scary to be a parent of an LGBTQ child. And to have that child trans seems particularly scary, especially in North Dakota. Though a friend and a parent of another trans male said that transitioning to male is like winning the golden ticket. Her son said that the change in how she was treated as a female versus a male was stunning, and doors opened when he was a male that were not open to the female. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for trans females. There's a ton of complexity to being a female in our society. The struggle is real. Trans females are frequently targeted and murdered, particularly trans women of color. Many can't understand why someone would, quote, give up being a man. And if you think about how some men, insult other men, they call them ladies, girls, or the grab them by the P word, implying weakness and not as good as. God forbid an insecure man should find a trans woman attractive. That could trigger self-examination. But instead, it often triggers aggression. We have a long history of toxic masculinity, and this is just one part. I just wanted to say out loud that trans females, that is male to female folks, have it so much worse than trans males. But if we can lead with love and not fear. I look forward to the day when gender and sexual identity, sexual orientation are no more of concern to anyone other as traits that are also beyond our control, such as blood type, eye color, height, you name it. Until that point, it is up to people like us, people for whom the difficult and aspirational 7 principles are a challenge and a guide. And just as a quick reminder, they are: the first one, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another. An encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregation. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And lastly, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are all a part. Lead with love, not with fear. May it be so. Namaste.
I brought back my yin yang image. Was one of my favorites for the longest time while I was thinking how sophisticated I can be, because I can recognize that I have good parts and bad parts in me, and in other people I would see how they can have all this combination of attributes, and I would very proudly think, no, they're not shades of gray, and definitely not 50 of them. We're all like checkerboards. We have both the good and the bad. And I was told that this is called dialectic thinking, where you have a thesis, you have antithesis, and together you realize, oh, they make this new blending of the two called synthesis. And I stayed in that self-admiration for a while. And then I started realizing that this is still some sort of binary thinking. And this symbol is still two-dimensional, is still black and white. And when we're thinking good or bad or big or small, compared to what? So we were walking, my oldest child and I, and I think at that time there were 5 or 4, and we see this lady tending to her garden, and was a bit chilly, and she had, I think, to my physician eye, at least 300 pounds, at least. And she had this jacket on her. And then my child stops right in front of her and gasps for air and says, and I got petrified. I thought, oh my gosh, is going to say something that I'm going to be ashamed for the rest of my life, and I'm in big trouble. And what came out was, what a nice purple jacket you have. So this kind of binary thinking, have or have nots, belong, outcast, um, girl, trans boy, they're still binary. So that's why I like the phase with Jay when was still deciding that this was acceptable, to have this fluidity, this germination period. And so I realized that these are things that we made up, that the world is actually quite colorful. And what if instead of thinking about complementarity, uh, we would think about forces at play, about three-dimensional ideas. And I'm going to bring you one here that's pretty three-dimensional. And this feelings wheel, how can you say what's complementary or the opposite of yellow? I can't. So a useful concept came later on when I read about I read Cynthia Bourgeaul's work. She is a theologian and a mystic. Um, she's Canadian, which already gives way to judgments. And she was mentioning about the play of forces, where you don't have a force and its opposite, but actually together they build into something new. As if you have flour and water, and together they make bread, which is neither something new. And one metaphor she had was about the wind in the sails that goes one direction. You have the resistance of water that goes in the other one, and you need the captain's vision and knowledge of the stars and of the direction and of the winds and the waves to steer the ship to safety. This is one of my favorite ships ever. I think everybody recognizes it. And because I'm bringing you to us recognizing it, I'm going to just bring to your attention that the story of the ship and the forces is not it. We are contemplating this. We are an additional dimension. So as I was contemplating all these, I realized that I don't know much. Who knows what other ways to think there are? I don't understand much. And I don't need to. This was the most liberating concept, or is brought me peace when I realized that I don't need to. And this poem helped tremendously. Khalil Gibran wrote, and a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us about children." And he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but not make them like you, for life does not go backward nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. I will leave you with an image that will be another testimony to how kids have their own thoughts. So this is a story again about this child of mine who was 5, and we were at MoMA, and I stayed in front of this Kandinsky for quite a while, and I was like just scratching my head, and I told, listen, I really cannot make anything out of what is in this painting. I don't understand it. And they said, who cares about shapes when the colors are so wonderful? I will leave you with this and my plea to adopt this wondrous way of looking at the world in a non-judgmental way. And if you ever need a bit of guidance or ideas on how to do that, I'm there for you.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, Liz. I loved that poem, that our children are not of us. That's a very good reminder of at every stage of that. And now we're going to have a song, and then we'll wrap things up.
We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
And then our closing words before we have our time together to discuss what we've heard today. So, I am not alone. There is a love holding me. May I move gently through this cloudy, murky, gray day. May I remember that this is just one day, and that showing up is at least half of what is asked of me. May I set aside my underlying anxiety that I will not get to everything, and put my trust and faith onto the riverbank of human community. We are working together. I am not alone. There is a love holding me that is unconcerned with my day's to-do list and more concerned with my spirit's survival, even its thriving in this beautiful, challenging world. May we all remember that Rome wasn't built in a day, that our efforts are part of an ongoing stream of efforts, of lives being lived beside one another, shoring up this world. May what little I do today be for the greater good. May I be gentle with others today, as I long for others to be gentle with me. May it be so.
Such sweet harmony, building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to with all of our voices and all of our visions. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such